Aloha! You are listening to Inside the Desert Oasis Room, episode number 243. This podcast is brought to you by Deadhead Rum, fine single blended rums made with sugarcane sourced from the jungles of Chiapas. Master blended by 43-year rum veteran Jorge Perez, the most decorated master blender in all of Mexico. For more information, check out their website at deadheadrum.com. This podcast is sponsored by Frogtown Brewery, an independent craft brewery and tap room located in Northeast Los Angeles along the LA River. Tell them the Desert Oasis Room sent you and get your first pint on us. Limitations apply. For more information, go to frogtownbrewery.com and follow them on social media at Frogtown Brewery. Today we bring you Henrik Van Ryzin, also known as Vantiki, from his Made in Hawaii symposium at this year's Tiki and Waikiki Weekender in Oahu, Hawaii. This is the audio piece from his fun and fascinating symposium, telling the story of his upbringing on the island of Oahu and how his art journey ultimately led him to making custom tiki mugs from the mainland state of Oregon. As always, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did bringing it to you. If you'd like to follow our adventures, check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/PolynesianPop, where we chronicle events, bars, travel spots, cocktail tutorials, and more. And if you enjoy this podcast, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/PolynesianPop, where membership grants you early access to podcasts and videos, front-of-the-line privileges to new merch releases, as well as exclusive content, meetups, and screen credits. Alrighty, let's get into this. Make yourself a cocktail and join us from the international marketplace at Tiki and Waikiki. Give it up for my friend Henrik Van Ryzin.
Inside the Desert Oasis Room.
All right. How's everyone doing this morning? All right, so it sounds like there's some energy out there still. Let's give this a shot. Aloha! Wow, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. I don't think we need to do that one again, right? All right, thanks for joining us for our first symposium at Tiki and Waikiki. You guys having a good time? All right. I see a lot of smiles. It's a good sign. We're in Hawaii, right? We're happy. I'm excited about this particular symposium because our friends here, Denise and Henrik, have been making mugs for quite a long time, and they have a fantastic YouTube channel. Has everybody seen that channel? If you're not subscribed, please look up Vantiki and subscribe to that channel. You'll learn everything about making mugs, and today we're going to hear their story. So let's give them a warm Tiki and Waikiki welcome, Vantiki.
Hello. Whew. Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for getting up early and coming out here. I know that's a challenge at an event like this to get up at 10. So I am going to do my best to breathe and stay calm and not talk fast. But if I start talking too fast, just wave at me or something like that, and I'll slow it down. But I am here today to talk about how we ended up making tiki mugs. Why do you make tiki mugs, or how do you become a mug maker is perhaps the second most common question that we get. The most common question is, what is a tiki mug? But I figure you all know what a tiki mug is, so I'm not too worried about explaining that. But people do ask all the time, how did you end up making a tiki mug? And I can tell you, I didn't think I was going to make tiki mugs when I grew up as a kid, but it definitely is a path. I think that my life kind of led me to doing this for a living, and that is the adventure that I want to share with you all today. So that is, in fact, me. I grew up on Oahu. I was born here. But in order to tell this story, we're going to have to travel back in time. So it's currently 2024, and we are on the island of Oahu, and there are about 1,400,000 people living in this state. But this story is going to begin in 1971. The state of Hawaii was only 12 years old at the time, and there were half the people here. So look to your right and just imagine that person vanishing, and that's what it was like living on Oahu in 1971. It was a pretty wild time. The state was experiencing a huge boom when Hawaii became a state. A lot of speculation and hopes and dreams were happening in the island. Lots of companies came over to Oahu, and there was a huge building boom. There was a huge technology boom. Lots of stuff was happening. All of the beach parks that you're enjoying today were probably built at this time, and these folks came over. My parents. And they were here, and they brought perhaps the most important aspect that I have as an artist today, and that is a sense of adventure. So this is my dad, Joe, on the right, or the left, sorry, and this is my mom, Diane. You can tell they're adventurous by their choice in shorts and locale. And they came to Oahu to work for, I guess what you'd call a .com startup of the day. It was called Mackay Range. And at the time, in 1971, oceanography was the rage. Jacques Cousteau was exploring the seas. People thought we would live underwater. Aquaculture was a big deal. And that drove my dad to go to grad school to become an ocean engineer. And then he was hired by this company, Mackay Range. And all of his parents, brothers, relatives thought he was nuts. But he said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to this island in the Pacific and starting a new life. And that's exactly what they did. And they got out here. As you can see, there weren't a lot of people on the island back then. And they started exploring right away. And they went to every single island, every single nook and cranny. The idea of like a rental-a-car agreement meant nothing to my dad. He would take rental cars wherever he could. He loved going to South Point on the Big Island because as an oceanographer, the water offshore there is about 1.5 miles deep, which he loved for some reason. It's his passion. And they met a lot of other like-minded explorers. They became passionate about bottle digging, which you may have guessed by the name is digging up old bottles. That was their jam back in the day. And their favorite place to do it was right around here. It was actually in Chinatown. So they would wait at night at construction sites where they were knocking down old, historic buildings, and they would go and dig up all these. And when I say old bottles, I'm talking bottles that were dropped by whalers. It's a very collectible thing. It sounds crazy, but they loved it. They also did, come on. Okay. Now, you would think that when I was born in 1972 that they would slow down their adventuring. They definitely did not. And I am so grateful that my parents dragged me everywhere with them. In addition to collecting bottles, they also like to collect fish. That's me meeting my first pufferfish lamp. And they went to places like this. Does any of you recognize this location? You're close. I can tell you, if you guys flew in here, this is where you landed. This is the reef runway. Before it was the reef runway, it was kind of this silty reef that sat out there forever, and it had two of the things that my parents loved the most. Old bottles dropped off of ships that used to dock here, and fish for their aquarium. Now, of course, if you got a newborn infant, oh my God, why does Siri keep doing this to me? If you got a newborn infant, how do you take a newborn infant safely with you adventuring? Well, you get this super dangerous looking raft and you build an adventure box. And that's my adventure box right there. I lived inside of the adventure box forever. My mom decorated the adventure box. And then I love, for additional safety in case of rain or sun, they cover it with a plastic sheet, which, I survived. I'm alive. Eventually, I outgrew my adventure box, and we built like an adventure tarp. This is me and my best friend, Chris, camping on one of the two islands off of Makapu'u Point. We spent a lot of time on these islands as kids. I love this island, one, because it was an island, and we got to have it to ourselves, which was pretty incredible, and it was covered with spent ammunition, which sounds dangerous, but back in the day, it was used as target practice during World War II, and I loved finding all the bullets on that island as a kid. This sense of adventure kind of spread not only to me, but to my little brother, Carl, who you can kind of see back here hiding behind this plant. Carl grew up to he got a degree in anthropology and archaeology, and so he like for his day job, would work at cultural sites and dig up treasures. And then when he was off on the weekends, he would go off on his own to find cool stuff. And this is him dragging me to the base of the Pali Lookout. So the Nu'uanu Pali Road travels, from here to Kailua Side. And ever since the first buggy went over, someone said, hey, what happens if you throw coins off of this? And so if you can make your way to the base of the Pali Lookout, there are thousands of old coins all in the, you just have to run your hand through the dirt and the coins just fall out, along with keys and marbles, and I think that's a bullet, and I don't know, that's like an amber thing, I don't know. It was super awesome. So my brother, he has a gift for finding old things. It's his magical skill. So what's it like growing up on an island in the middle of the Pacific? Well, the one thing, the mantra of my life back then was, you are their vacation, because you never leave the island, but everyone comes to see you. And I mean, we are 2,500 miles from anything. So growing up, there was this mythical land called the mainland, and it was like another country. I only got to see it twice in my life before I left for college, but everyone from the mainland would come to see you. And it was weird. This is the house I grew up in. This was built in 1968. It's like just 5 years before we moved here. This was all pasture land on Kaneohe Ranch. And it was bizarre growing up here because you would have what you would think is a normal life, but everything you would see on TV was completely different than the way you lived. And it had I just could never put it together. This is a Thanksgiving dinner. This is how we had Thanksgiving. Every year we would pack up the cooler and we'd go to Waimea Bay or Kailua Beach, and that's how we had Thanksgiving. And it was really weird looking at Thanksgiving in movies because it was totally different. And I have to share this. This is the infamous Thanksgiving where we backed over our Thanksgiving dinner. We loaded up the cooler. My mom is literally crying there. My brother thought it was the best day in the world. We did save it. The dinner was saved. But it was things like that I thought this was normal, but TV was saying otherwise. Other things that were different about growing up in Hawaii was we had May Day. May Day is Lay Day in Hawaii, and ever since I was a little kid, that is the big day at school where you wear nice clothes, you do dancing, you do singing. It's kind of like, I guess, theater recitals that they would have on the mainland that I would see on TV. I vividly remember this year because we had to buy white long pants, which pissed my mom off because she knew I would never, ever wear these expensive white pants any other day in my life. And I also remember picking out this shirt because I thought it was so awesome because it had parrots on it. I had no idea that it was Magnum P.I.'s shirt from the show. And then even weirder as an adult looking back at these photos, this is me, this is my friend Collie, and this is my friend Jack in the middle. All three of us are wearing Magnum shirts. He's wearing a white version of the shirt, which I had never seen in my life. And then my friend Jack in the middle is wearing the famous Black Orchard one, or Black Orchid, which is worn both by Thomas and then Thomas Part 2 in the remake. It's just so incredible that there's this triangle of Magnum happening right there. So cool. I wish I still had that shirt. So, like I said, you are their vacation. Every year, nonstop, we would have relatives visiting, my dad's old family friends, business partners. They'd all come, and you would do the same thing every single time visited. You would start with a hike, and just like it is now, most of the really good hikes on the island are illegal. So this would be me sneaking onto Mount Olamana, and there we're at somewhere in Mokuleia. That's my Uncle Peter. I don't know where we're sneaking into, but that's the way you started. And then also you would see the same thing again and again. And a lot of these things, it's incredible, they never change. So PCC, I mean, this photo could have been taken yesterday at PCC. I'm sure that boat is still floating around over there. Hanauma Bay was very similar back then as it is now. The one thing I do remember about Hanauma Bay that has changed drastically is you used to drive your car down to the bottom. Now, you couldn't park down there, but it was like a loading and unloading area. So we'd all drive down there, take everything out, you spend the whole day swimming, and then it was like my parents would have a mini argument about who has to go back up to get the car to come back. And the thing that sucked is I was always a loser because no matter which parent they had to go, they'd be like, Henrik, you're coming too. And I'm like, oh, come on. So we'd have to walk all the way back up. Matsumoto's still there, I mean, it's different, but also kind of the same. But as you can see, there were a lot less people back then. Remember, there was only half the population. And then Diamond Head was also, it's like an institution, it's always there. But the thing that I remember about this, nobody ever went to Diamond Head. I don't know when Diamond Head suddenly became like the thing, but back then it was empty and you could go everywhere in Diamond Head. There were all these like floors and levels, you could crawl all over the place. It was like a it was the ultimate playground for me and my brother. And the thing that I remember most about this is anytime we would go to see a movie in Waikiki, because there were no theaters on my side of the island, and you'd be waiting in line, and like my brother and I were getting rambunctious or whatever, be like, go hike Diamond Head. So my mom would take us to hike Diamond Head while my dad stayed in line at the theater, and then we'd go and then see the movie. Okay, now, even as a kid, there are certain buildings and places that I was like, there's something special about that building. This is an example. So this is the Wailua Bank. This is the second bank built on the island of Oahu. It was built in 1917, and this looks like a giant stately building, but this photo is almost to scale as to how big this building. It looks like a bank for magicians or something. It's a really odd building, and it always stood out to me. This is near Haleiwa, and it's a sugar mill bank, and I remember driving by it as a kid being mystified by this strange building. Extra mystified because at that time in the 70s, it was also a bar. It was called the Sugar Bar. And so as a kid, you're like, sugar bar? Ooh, what kind of sugar you got in there? I was like super into it. And then as a teenager, I was like, oh, this is the forbidden bar. Then I thought it was cool because it's a sugar town and it has a sugar bar in it. Sadly, this building is not there. And then also in the weird cloud of memory, right next door in Haleiwa, there's another tiny little bank building. This building's been there forever. I took this photo just 4 days ago. Currently, it is nothing right now, but it's been so many things. I remember when it was a bank, then it was a Crazy Shirts, and then it was a real estate office, and then it was a coffee shop, and now it's kind of nothing. And hopefully, it looks like it's getting a new roof, so hopefully it'll still be around. But speaking of things that are not around, some things I thought would be here forever, and we would go all the time to see them, and then they just kind of disappeared. This is the Kahuku Sugar Mill. I totally remember them burning all the sugarcane fields as a kid because the smoke would go all the way down to the windward side. And then every time we had someone visit and we had to take them back to the airport, you would leave an hour early so that you could stop at the Dole Cannery. And we'd watch them all load up all the Dole pineapples. My relatives would buy pineapples to take back with them. And then the ultimate memory is in the Dole Cannery, they had a water fountain that did not dispense water. It dispensed pineapple juice. And it was unbelievable. I would probably drink about 3 quarts of pineapple juice all by myself in the corner just because I'm like, you guys, it's free. It was so cool. I'm so sad that's gone. This is, of course, the place that had the infamous, the Dole pineapple up on top of the water tower. Okay, where are we at? Okay, so yes, we were on a tiny island in the Pacific, but sometimes you got to leave the island. And I got to do it twice, and we did go to Disneyland. And let me tell you, Disneyland had a profound impact on me as a kid. Because at this time, I already liked making things. I already had this sense of adventure that my parents instilled in me. And this was a land entirely built by artists. I had never been in a place like that, where every single little thing was made by somebody. And more importantly, it served the purpose of escapism. It took you somewhere else. And it was like manufactured adventure, if you will. And I fell in love with that, big time. The other thing that the mainland had was a lot of exotic items that you cannot get here in Hawaii. This is my brother selecting a fine rubber snake at Adventureland at the end of the Jungle Boats, which then totally freaked out the guys at TSA when we tried to bring these back to Hawaii. And then I'm so grateful that my dad took this picture. This is a picture of all the mainland relics that we bought on this massive road trip across America. And this shows you what I, growing up on the island, thought was exotic. I bought some exotic animal parts. I have a rabbit pelt here, and I have some deer antlers, like strange exotic creatures. There's a whip because Indiana Jones was really big at the time. And I also have about 50 pounds of rocks. I picked up rocks everywhere. My parents thought I was crazy, but on this island, there's only one kind of rock. You got the lava rock, right? So I'm like, look at this rock. It has quartz. This one's shiny. This one has sparkles. These Randati skulls are from Disneyland, and my God, I wish I still had those skulls. And then also in this photo, I want you to take a look at this object right here. This is a new invention in the 80s called a fanny pack. And I don't know if my dad brought the first fanny pack to Oahu, but I think he might have. But he loved that thing because he could carry all his photography stuff, and yeah, he loved it. So this photo, I couldn't believe I found this photo. I do still have these silhouettes from Disneyland. Okay, so aside from a sense of adventure, the other thing that my parents instilled on me is this. My dad's, anytime I thought something looked cool or I was interested in something, he'd come over like, I bet we could make a better one. And that was like his mantra. My dad was an ocean engineer, and this is him overlooking his company, which is right down here on Mackay Pier. My parents were makers. There was nothing that they would buy. It was almost like a challenge for them to make anything. They just refused to hire anybody. As a kid, I'm not going to lie, it drove me a little bit nuts because he would make me help to do all this stuff, but I'm, as an adult, very grateful that they put me through that. So that's my mom like mixing cement in our front yard. I don't know what she's doing. There we are building a fence in the backyard. And my dad took this sense of adventure and the sense of making into his own company. So like I said, he was brought over kind of on a .com startup of the day. The year after he got here, after they sold their house on the mainland or whatever, his company went belly up, and they kind of had, it was right literally when I was born. They were like, oh no. So he started his own company right there on Mackay Ocean Engineering on Mackay Research Pier. As a kid, I had no idea what an ocean engineer did, but I did know that it involved submersibles. So they had these submarines at the pier, and I loved them. It was so cool. I mean, look at these things. Now, these are the two that they have over there right now. These are run by the Hawaii Undersea Research Laboratory, or HURL, as it's called, which I think is such a weird name to pick for an oceanographic institute, but that's what they went with. This is the Pisces 4 and 5 research submarines. These are some of the most advanced research submarines in the world. Submersibles, they're submersibles. Sorry, I don't want to get that mixed up. Now, the first thing that my dad designed when he was at Mackay Range to show his kind of out-of-the-box thinking was this thing. It's called the LRT. Now, the most difficult thing when you're handling a submersible is taking it in and out of the water. Usually back in the day, a tender boat would pick it up with a crane and drop it onto the boat. That works fine when the ocean is flat, but when the ocean is swinging around or like waves, you basically have a wrecking ball, a very expensive wrecking ball. So my dad designed this. The LRT, think of it like a twin-hulled voyaging canoe that sinks, and then the submersible docks with it, and then the whole thing surfaces. And then you can drive around on the surface with your submersible. It's completely safe up there. So that was his first claim to fame. Now, if you were looking at this tiny, I love this little submarine. This one is called the Makali'i. It was their first one. Maui divers used this to get all the coral back in the day. You'll notice something strange on the front of the submersible right there. See that little thing? That's my bicycle tire from my bicycle. Like that, like I was in I don't know, 4th grade, my dad had to measure the distance between two rocks off the coast of the Big Island underwater to put like a cable between them. I don't know what the deal was, but back then, I mean, you can't take a tape measure down there. So he realized, oh, if I had a wheel and I put a little mark on it and I knew the diameter of the wheel, I could count the revolutions, blah, blah, blah. Henrik, I need your bicycle wheel. But I'm like, but Dad, it's going to pop underwater. Because I was like, budding science brain. I'm like, the pressure, won't it pop? He's like, no, we're going to fill the inner tube with water. I'm like, how? And he's like, we're going to use the bicycle pump. But how? And I remember he filled up our bathtub, put an inner tube in there, put the bicycle pump under the water in the bathtub, and pumped it like that. My mind was blown. And so then he put it on the submarine. They went diving. And then 2 days later, he put it back on my bike. And I got to ride around with it. And I was like, oh, my God, this has been underwater. It's pretty cool. This is my dad's office, the view from his office, and it just kind of shows the oceanographic wonderland that was Mackay Research Pier. That is the submarine shed over here. So the submarines are in here. That's the LRT darked right there. This is, believe it or not, an underwater habitat called the Ager. It's kind of like Sea Lab was like all the rage back then. So this is a version of Sea Lab that Navy built. This photo is pretty cool because it was taken in 1982, and this photo was my dad thought this might be the last time he sees any of this because, as you can notice, the surf is pretty crazy. Hurricane Eva is barreling down on Oahu right now. So he went in. This boat doesn't even live here, really. It lives over at Sea Life Park, but it's like running for shelter, and they docked it there. This is the next morning. They went back. This is the biggest hurricane to hit in my lifetime while we were on Oahu. Hurricane Eva hit while I was in college. Hurricane Aniki. That's the one that was in Jurassic Park. But that mostly hit Kauai. But this one nailed Oahu. And this day was so cool for me as a kid because, it's sad that little boat sank. But a couple hours after this photo was taken, it went all the way down. But I got to snorkel around a sunken ship, which was so cool for me as a kid. And even more surreal, right next to the sunken ship was my dad's desk underwater because this is inside of his office. It blew out all the windows on the Mackay side, picked up all the desks, filing cabinet and everything, and then threw it into the bay there. So it was all sunken on the bottom. There's a file cabinet you could open underwater. It's pretty cool. He didn't think it was cool, but I loved it. So this was it was a cool hub for oceanographic engineering at the time. Lots of people were noticing the things that were being done by Hawaii Undersea Research Laboratory, HURL, at the time. And National Geographic came by, and this is Sylvia Earle, and she did the deepest solo dive by a female. This is her inside of this thing called a gym suit, and it's like a submarine that you can wear and walk around in. So I vividly remember coming. I touched that flag, which still blew my mind to get the magazine, a couple of months later. But basically, lots of people loved the pier. I wasn't the only one that loved the pier. Lots of people noticed, and eventually Hollywood noticed the pier. And you might recognize that fellow, and I was too young to remember this, but Jack Lord filmed tons of Hawaii Five-0 on the pier when I was a kid. Now, I don't remember it, but I vividly remember this happening. Magnum PI featured the pier all the time. In fact, my dad's office was TC's office in the show, the guy that had Island Hoppers, the helicopter thing. That was my dad's office. So for the first, it was either the 2 or 3 seasons, they'd go and shoot here during the day, and then on the weekends, my dad would clear out of his office, and they would redress it for TC's office, and then my dad would come back in later. Eventually, they got tired of doing that, and they built a replica of my dad's office at Diamond Head Studios. But until then, when they were filming, I remember I just could not wait to get out of school. My mom would pick us up after school. We'd zip down to the pier, and I'd sit up. This photo's taken up in the balcony looking down, and I would watch all day the filming. I loved it. This was, again, that manufactured escapism. I'm watching people create an alternate reality. I'm watching artists make things that takes people somewhere else, and I loved it. This is my dad's truck. Talk about projects. And not ever wanting to spend any money. He would always buy surplus Army trucks and then build them up and make them run. And this was a super cool one, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, after we watched Indiana Jones, and I was the coolest kid on the block because we all would reenact the chase sequence at the end of Raiders. But eventually the truck did die, and my dad sold it to Magnum PI, and they blew it up on the show, which was super cool. And I totally remember this because this is, of course, before the day of pressing pause when you're watching a TV show. So my dad, we knew it was gonna be on at 7. He set up the tripod in the living room in front of our 19-inch color TV. And he sat there the whole show, with his thumb on the button, wait, click, click. And then he took those 2 photos. So, now, of course, I could have gone back and tried to find a real screen grab, but I like this version best of you can even kind of see the reflection of my dad there a little, and there's our lamp in the living room. We're reflected in the TV. Other stuff came by too, talk about manufactured reality. So those are the big TV shows that shot down there. Some really small TV shows shot down there too. M Station Hawaii was Jack Lord's attempt to do something after Hawaii Five-0. It went nowhere, but it was kind of a cool spy thriller that shot down there. And also Tales of the Gold Monkey filmed at the pier. And that was pretty incredible because it wanted to be like Indiana Jones, which was my favorite movie at the time. And they had a flying boat come down to the pier. It was pretty cool. And I also remember they did a scene where someone knocked someone over the head with a bottle, and they had the fake, movie glass. And that was, again, me thinking oh my God, this is incredible, this manufactured fake world. Now, the submersible pilot that worked for HURL, there are not a lot of submersible pilots in the world, apparently. It's a kind of a specialized job. So they would fly him all over the world to pilot other submersibles. He famously steered the wet sub that was used in The Spy Who Loves Me, and then also all of the submersibles used in James Cameron's The Abyss. And I would bug him nonstop. He probably hated me as a kid because I'm just tell me more about the movies. But it's just something that I fell in love with. It had a huge impact on me. This is me at my desk as a kid, and this is my workbench desk that my dad built out of a repurposed bowling alley floor because he would never buy any furniture. But this was my life. I would draw all day, build models, and make stuff. But I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't know until this TV show came on in the 80s, the SPFX making of The Empire Strikes Back. And at that moment, I realized this is a job that you can have. You can get paid to make monsters and models for movies, and it's legitimate. It's real. And that's when I knew that's what I had to be. That's the job I needed to have. Of course, there's no school you go to at the time. This is before the internet. No one had any idea what you should do to become a makeup artist. So I just really fell in love with Halloween, and you can see my progression of Halloween costumes get more and more advanced as I got into middle and high school. It was my jam. That's all I did. My parents, I'm going to say, were very supportive of their weird little kid that didn't want to be an engineer and was really bad at math. And I'm very grateful that my dad supported me in that, because it's very easy to say, you'll be a starving artist, don't be an artist, don't do it. But they encouraged me. But also nobody had an idea what to do, like how to make it happen. So, of course, I went to college, because that's what you do, right? So I went to Peoria, Illinois to go to college. I got a degree in communications. But the most important thing I got in college was Denise. We met on the very first day of school. We hit it off immediately. We were the only two people that wanted to work in Hollywood. It was our dream. So we slogged through 4 years of college in Illinois, and we went to LA to make it happen. We literally took the train to LA. It was kind of a nightmare, but we did it. Now, Hollywood, it wasn't what I expected. It was awesome. I'm not going to lie. But maybe there's an unknown danger in getting your dream job, and you get your dream job and you say, maybe this isn't my dream job. I don't know. It was cool. I mean, it was basically Halloween all over again, but with much more elaborate and expensive costumes. I got to work on a lot of cool movies, and most importantly, I got to learn a lot from perhaps the best artists in the world. These are the people that make escapism. I learned all about mold making, sculpting, casting, you name it, painting. It was like graduate school for making stuff, and it was amazing, but I knew it wasn't for me. I missed the islands. I never saw Denise, and we decided we're going to move back. We're going back to Hawaii. We're going to do it. So we moved back to Oahu, and we didn't really know what we were going to do. But there was a .com startup thing happening. The .com boom was happening, so just like my dad got sucked back to the islands, we got sucked here with a .com startup, and we were doing like digital stuff. We were doing like iPhone development, designing games, doing animation work. And then one night, one of my coworkers said, we're going to go to a Exotica concert tonight. You want to come? And I was like, Exotica concert? Is that like nudity? I didn't know anything about it. It's like, no, it's Exotica. You're going to love it. I'm like, okay. And he's like, just wear a bunch of aloha wear. It's going to be cool. We're going to go to the Hawaiian hut. So we went to the Hawaiian hut. I had never been to a tiki bar before. I've been to the Enchanted Tiki Room, but I just didn't know that they existed on the island. In fact, that's because at the time, very few did exist on the island. This one sadly closed shortly after this concert, but this concert changed everything for me. I cannot establish that enough. We saw a band play, Tiki, did anybody go last night to Skull and Crown? Anybody? Okay, so Kit on the keyboards is one of the lead people of Tiki. So I saw him perform in this tiki bar. The Hawaiian hut, this is the best photo I could find of the interior of the Hawaiian hut. This is awful. You know in Disneyland when they say no flash photography, please? The same rule applies to tiki bars. Don't judge the Hawaiian hut by this photo, because it was an unbelievable place. So I went in there, and I was taken away somewhere else. And then more importantly, I didn't even drink at the time, but I felt, I'm here, I should get a Mai Tai. So I ordered a Mai Tai, and it was served in a tiki mug. I still have that mug to this day. There it is, that's the Hawaiian hut mug I got. And I held that mug and I said, I've got to make these things. It is everything that I love. It is sculpture, it is art, it is escapism, and it's an engineering challenge. How far can you push this functional shape into something that takes you somewhere else? Like, how far can you push it? So the next day, I called up my fourth grade art teacher, who I knew had a kiln in her house, and I sculpted that mug. That was my first tiki mug I ever made. And of course, it piled on from there, and the mugs got more and more elaborate. But they always kind of harken back to what I love: the ocean, adventure, Polynesia, exploration. So that's a poi pounder mug. These are giant crab claws. And then in a weird full circle movement, Disneyland hired us to make mugs for them. So it was bizarre to then be an artist making escapism for the company that inspired me to make escapism. It was this weird circle, but it was a pretty incredible experience. Now, as we got busier and busier in Hawaii, it just became more difficult to do our job in Hawaii, and we did eventually, 8 years ago, move to Oregon. And people ask me all the time, don't you miss Hawaii? And I do miss it a lot, but I always think of this line that Victor Wong says in Big Trouble in Little China: China's in the heart, Jack. Wherever I go, she's with me. And that's how I feel about growing up here. It's bizarre. It's like when you throw a rock into a pond and those ripples go out. You never know when those ripples of your childhood on this island will find you. And they will find you in the strangest, in the most unexpected places. I've got an example. this is Hank Horn. He was my dad's business partner that co-founded Mackay Ocean Engineering. Now, before Hank started working at Mackay, he was an incredible adventurer. He sailed a 20-foot sailing boat around the entire globe, and he spent, here's his boat right there. He's got a little picture of his boat, and that's docked in Tahiti. He spent a lot of time in Tahiti. In fact, while he was in Tahiti, they were filming a little film there called Mutiny on the Bounty. Now, the thing that's interesting about Hank Horn is he is, I guess, one of the last master riggers at the time. Very few people knew how to rig and run an actual sailing ship like this, a fully masted sailing ship. So they built this for the film, this Bounty. It was a completely accurate recreation of the Bounty. And Hank did all of the rigging. He set all the rigging for the boat, and he's actually in the movie. You can see him running up and down the sails. I don't know the technical term, but now cut to many, many years later. I have a lot less hair, and we went to our first hukilau, where we went to the Mai Kai. And now, if you've been to the Mai Kai, there's a tiny little bar attached to the side of the Mai Kai called the Molokai bar. Yeah, the Molokai bar. And I'm walking around thinking, this is the most well-made tiki bar I've ever seen in my life, except for Skull and Crown, of course. And I'm like, this is unbelievable. I mean, the depth and quality of the construction. And then I'm told, oh, that's because it was built by the art department from Mutiny on the Bounty. When they wrapped filming in Tahiti, they all went to Florida and built this bar with a lot of the props and stuff from the film. So they even have this fully rigged replica of the Bounty ship here, and a lot of rigging. And I couldn't help but think, like, did Hank touch this? I'm like, certainly friends that worked with Hank, co-workers, touched this. It was so magical, but it doesn't stop there. Then you have a boat called the Falls of Clyde. So the Falls of Clyde was a square-rigged boat. You can still kind of see it out in the harbor out there. This is me as a kid with my family on the Falls of Clyde. We went to the Falls of Clyde all the time. When they brought the Falls of Clyde to Hawaii, it was not rigged. It had no standing rigging. The masts were not up, and nobody knew how to put the standing rigging up. Standing rigging it never moves. It's the ropes that just hold the mast to keep them from falling down. But Hank Horn knew how to put the standing rigging up, so he did all the rigging on the Falls of Clyde. So it was cool as a kid going there, and I felt close to Hank because it was all there. But then it gets even weirder as an adult because the Falls of Clyde figurehead is now in Skull and Crown. So it was really, and so I got to tell you, seriously, last night, being able to just touch the figurehead was very strange because as a kid, I always remember looking up at it, not being able to touch it because, it was on the boat. And then again, it brought me closer to like Hank. It was pretty magical. So yeah, the islands never really leave you. It's a pretty cool thing. I'll never forget Oahu. It'll always be with me. Okay, I think, okay, so I would like to just make a quick pitch for our gift shop that we have in the corner. I did bring these specific for this event because they are very tied into Polynesia. These are modeled after adzes. That's a carving tool. These are two ubiquitous tools that are used throughout Polynesia, adzes and pounders. The pounder will be used to make poi, so we have a pounder mug, and we did bring a few adzes with us also as well, and we'll have them over there after. Oh, okay, I did it. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Anybody have any questions? No pressure. No questions at all? Yes.
When you're designing mugs, what's that process like?
Oh, that's an excellent question. What's the process like for designing mugs? So I will usually get my best mug ideas come from two places. Denise, or when I'm out running. So I'll be out running and I'll think of an idea for a mug, and then I usually will write it down on my phone. So on my phone, I have like a long list of like future mug ideas. And then Denise and I will sit down and we'll figure out which mugs we want to do. Like that list always is shuffled around. Like maybe some other mug maker will make a mug idea that we have on the list, or like to cross that idea out. Or and then once an idea comes up, like that's the one we're going to do, I'll do a bunch of sketching in my little paper sketchbook. Then we'll move to sketching on my computer, and then I'll print out. The big thing is like, how big do you want to make the mug? Because like once you start sculpting, you're committed. So I'll print it out and I'll actually do paper cutouts so I can hold the paper cutout and like, okay, this is a good size. I like this size. And I always make the mugs too big. And Denise is like, make it smaller. Come on, make it smaller. So then we'll try to shrink it down a little bit. And that's kind of how they gestate. And then it moves into sculpting and production. And But the ideas, Denise and running. Yes. Oh, the most complicated. Yeah. Yeah, we've done some rough ones. I don't know. What do you think? The zombie. Yeah, so we're doing a zombie jug right now, and that one, the mold is not extremely complicated, but it's a very involved glazing process. I think the most complicated mold would be the suffering banana. We did a mug for, and that mold was extremely challenging. It was, I think, like 8-piece mold. That the banana had to be tilted. It was intense. Mold making is the most stressful part of the entire process for me. It's like you're committed there. You can completely mess up your sculpture. You never know. It's like a pass-fail grade. You know what I mean? There's no getting a C+ in mold making. It's like, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. Culture shock, yeah. It was intense because Oregon is Howley Town. Like, I have never lived in a more like white place in my entire life, and it's weird. It weirds me out, and it's not just from the people, but also just in the food. There was not a lot of diversity there, and that it bummed me out a little bit. It took some getting used to. So that was a huge shock. And the other biggest shock was it's very quiet in the woods. Like, I'm used to having a lot of noise around me all the time growing up here. So that was another big thing. But definitely Howley Town, weird. It's super weird. It still weirds me out to this day. Yes?
When you look back at your time in the Hollywood and the entertainment industry, what project are you most proud of?
Oh, that's a great question. What project am I most proud of? I would say The Big Lebowski is my crowning achievement. Not that I had much to do with it. I just made the toe. But it was cool to do. I'm very proud of that, and it's cool. And also, we got to do a live cast of Jeff Bridges, and I am a huge Tron nerd. Like, Tron is like my favorite movie as a kid, so we did a live cast of him, and it was incredible to meet him. So that is probably my... and then From Dusk Till Dawn is also pretty big. Yeah, but... I worked on a lot of not so big movies, but it was a lot of fun. It was an adventure, non-stop adventure. Yeah. Anything else? Yes. Oh, so that's a good question. Well, we started making mugs. I would hand build mugs. So that first mug you saw the picture of, that's a one of one, and I was too scared. I didn't know anything about ceramics. I'm totally self-taught with ceramics. So I would make my mugs like a one-of-a-kind. So I would spend, all day sculpting just one mug, and that was it. And then you'd fire it, and it would crack, and then you'd cry the next day. So those are pretty complicated. I would say the most complicated hand-built mug I call it the Sunken Moai is Dreaming, and it's like that big. And there's an octopus inside of the moai's mouth, like crawling out. It's a super cool mug. And I remember sculpting that. Like, we took it to Tiki Oasis while it was still like warm out of the kiln, and it got bought. We sold that one. Woo! But then after many years of doing that, struggling doing the hand-built mugs, because you lose so many in the kiln. It would be like a 50% loss rate. So hard. That's just the nature of hand-built ceramics. I remember going to Tiki Oasis one year, and John Mulder was there with Ekin Bookham. It was his first year at Oasis. And I was like, who's this guy? His mugs are so good. Oh, these are so good. And I went up to him with like a little handmade flask that I had. And I was like, could I hire you to produce these? And he looked at me, he's like, you know how to do this yourself. You can do it. And I was like, but it was a good little like, kick in the okole, and it got me going. And so I went home all shamed, and then I made a mold and figured it out. So that's kind of the story of that. But definitely the hand-built mugs were intricate. Any other questions? No? Good. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, everybody.
Let's give another hand for Henrik. Thank you, Henrik. Now I want to go to your website and buy a mug. So where can we send everybody if they want to see your work?
Oh, that's right. Instagram, Vantiki, and Van Ryzin Studios. And then, of course, Vantiki.com. Yeah.
And the YouTube, you guys aren't already subscribed to the YouTube, please subscribe.
Yeah, I'm very proud of my YouTube work. We put a lot of time into the YouTube, but it's fun.
Awesome. Thanks again, Henrik.